NASCAR made history over the weekend with its very first street race in the streets of Chicago, but it was mired with rains, arrests, a couple of deaths, not joking, and yes, some canceled concerts and a few ruffled feathers. But overall, was it a success, and will we see more street racing in NASCAR's future, or is this a one and done? Let's go ahead and break it down today on Shifting Gears. I'm Alan Bailey, and before we get into the melee, make sure you mash that subscribe button so that you come on back for the next one, and log on to AmericanRacingNetwork.com for the latest motorsports news. ARN, the Motorsports Authority. Yeah, racing in Chicago in the streets was interesting over the weekend, to say the least, and although a lot of people were bitching, moaning, and groaning about it, you gotta admit, overall, this was a huge success and a huge win for NASCAR. Yes, it rained on Sunday, and yes, it rained and thunderstormed on Saturday, which forced the cancellation of the Xfinity race. But overall, the track itself was phenomenally cool. You gotta admit that. With tons of passing zones that even Cup regulars admitted they weren't expecting. And yes, we saw Shane Van Gisberger, or as we'll go ahead and call him here, SVG, win the Cup race in his very first start, something that we haven't seen in NASCAR's Cup Series since the year 1960. And oh, by the way, it's the first time a road course ringer, quote unquote, has won in the Cup Series since 1973. But with over 70% estimated of the fan base at Chicago's street course, first-time NASCAR attendees, you have to admit, this was a massive success. It now proves that NASCAR can effectively go to any city, anywhere it wants, so long as the local politics work themselves out. $50 million plus spent over the weekend at this street course by NASCAR, and honestly, this is a huge win. You look at what SVG did over the weekend, it opens up the doors to him potentially going full-time NASCAR racing sometime down the road, potentially in 2025, with him even getting behind the Cup car for maybe a couple more races in 2023, maybe even 2024. It's Project 91 over at Trackhouse's first victory. They currently don't have any other races planned for 2023 and beyond at the moment, but they're still working on some stuff. They don't even have a full-time Cup program behind this Project 91 car. Effectively, they just pulled people out of the office and out of the shop that worked there 9 to 5 and said, hey, you're going to go ahead and work on a car this weekend in Chicago. Get ready. And boy, did they make it count. Now, it's no surprise because SVG is a 3-time Supercar champ in Australia, and he brings a massive fan base in Australia and New Zealand with him. And honestly, I do think that this was best case scenario for NASCAR. A lot of people were paying attention to the sport that have never even heard of it, or some that haven't paid attention to NASCAR since Marcus Ambrose ran back in the day. And now all of those eyeballs are looking at this going, yeah, you know what? Maybe. Even SVG admitted that the top 10 supercar drivers can do this and that they are just as good as him, which they are. And let's not kid ourselves. SVG was insanely fast over the weekend. He was 0.8 faster than everyone else. No joke. He had the fastest lap of the race. And while you had some Cup regulars like Chase Elliott crying that it was an embarrassment to lose to this guy, meh, you had other champs like Kyle Larson who said it was a privilege and that he was proud to have lost to this guy because he is so good at what he does. But how did the fan base in Chicago treat it, and how did the people of Chicago treat NASCAR coming into their hometown over the weekend? Overall, tons of positive energy. Honestly, there was very, very few, if any, negative naysayers who were complaining about NASCAR being in town over the weekend, and for the most part, everyone in the city knew NASCAR was in town. Even some people were convinced once they saw cars on track on Friday and Saturday, hey, I want to go to that on Sunday, and they went out and purchased a ticket, which was pretty darn cool. The Xfinity race opened the weekend on Saturday, but unfortunately about 25 laps in, we saw thunder and lightning about 8 miles from the track, and NASCAR's policy is whenever we see thunder and lightning close to the track, everything closes down essentially. We go red flag and the grandstands are evacuated. Now, because the city of Chicago is a city, when the grandstands evacuated, most people went into the park. But city policy states that whenever there's thunder and lightning in the area, they will completely 100% evacuate the park and not let anyone in until it's all clear. Now, NASCAR's a little bit more lenient than the city, and unfortunately, the city did not let anybody back in on Saturday. But that was fine because the storms unfortunately didn't let up until Sunday. NASCAR told the Xfinity teams, come back tomorrow morning, we'll try again. But unfortunately on Sunday, not only had the skies opened up overnight and all morning long, but they kept staying open. More rain on Sunday than the previous month in Chicago, which is a new record for total rainfall in a 24-hour period. NASCAR tried, and unfortunately there was not a window of opportunity with daylight and with regulations with when they can use the racetrack to get that Xfinity race in. So 2 laps from halfway, they went ahead and called it. A lot of controversy around this, a lot of people upset, oh, NASCAR should have called it Saturday. Maybe they should have, but honestly, NASCAR wanted to try to get those 2 laps in. And I gotta give them credit, because they could have taken those cars out on the racetrack in the flooding rain and done 2 parade laps just to get the 2 laps in. I honestly think NASCAR made the right call calling it 2 laps before. I hate it for the race fans, I hate it for those Xfinity teams, but NASCAR did the best they could with the circumstances. They ultimately had to clear those grandstands because it is better to go ahead and risk the integrity of the sport and of that race than risking someone's life. Remember, at Pocono just a few years ago, we lost a fan because NASCAR waited a little too long to call it, and unfortunately, a fan was struck and killed by lightning. Sunday morning, I honestly did not think we were going to see racing. I thought we were going to be racing on Monday with how much rain had come down. At one point, 9 inches of water had flooded pit road and most of the front stretch. And I thought, no way we're doing this. But somehow, the skies let up, NASCAR went out there and did a phenomenal job. Sincerely. Kudos to NASCAR, kudos to the track workers in the city of Chicago for getting that track clear, because it got pretty darn dry in a few laps of the green flag, and we were only about an hour late from the original start time, which honestly blew me away. During the race itself, NASCAR opted for single file restarts. Move of the race on NASCAR's part. It eliminated the craziness that we saw at COTA, that we saw at the Indy Road Course, where everybody went 7 wide going into a turn that could barely accommodate 2 wide, and it forced these drivers to respect one another a little bit more and respect the track, which is exactly what was required of this street course. And on top of that, you had top-tier talent that was spinning out or getting into the tire barriers. Yes, Noah Gragson in the Wendy's car was really trying to push Wendy's over all the McDonald's advertisement, crashing his car not once, not twice, but 3 times into the tire barriers. And you even saw spins and crashes by the likes of Kyle Busch, who's tied for the most victories this season, Martin Truex Jr., who won on the last road course race, Tyler Reddick, who was leading early in this race and looked to be a contender for the victory, all spinning, all getting into the tire barriers at some point during this race. The top-tier talent was struggling. They were pushing the envelope a little too much at a track that didn't have 100% grip that it was capable of because of the rain, and they ultimately paid the price for it in the finishing order. But it wouldn't be a NASCAR race if there wasn't a little bit of controversy. The race, originally slated for 100 laps, got cut to 75 laps. Now, that I have absolutely no problem with. The only minor problem that I have with it is when NASCAR actually made the call. They made it under caution after some teams had already pit and some had not. It forced some teams to come back down pit road, and it trapped some guys back in traffic, including the eventual winner, SVG. He was trapped in traffic by the call. Now, the race started late. No arguments there. There's no lights around the track. Yes, there are street lights, but that simply does not provide enough light around this track to actually make it safe for the drivers. There can be an argument made to actually put headlights on these cars for the next street race, but that's a whole nother discussion and a whole nother video. Now, NASCAR could have and maybe should have made this call before the race, but they wanted to try to get all 100 advertised laps in, and you can't fault them for that. And to anybody who is going to sit there and bitch and moan about the fact that their team was caught off guard by the cut of the 25 laps from the race total's distance, let me put it this way. You knew we were starting late. You knew it was getting dark. You knew that this was a high potential. And guess what? About 9 cars gambled, made the right pit call, and actually got track position out of it. And then you had the inevitable race winner who did not make the right call and had to come through the field and did. So it was possible to come through the field in this race. It's just that some drivers, most drivers didn't, and some drivers just didn't have the big brain race strategy in their head to make the proper call. Inevitably, you're having a couple of crew chiefs this week bitch and moan about the fact that they made the wrong pit call, and instead of owning up to the fact that they screwed up the race call, they're just going to go ahead and blame NASCAR and blame the situation, which is fine, because if you don't want to own up to your mistakes, go ahead, don't own up to them. That's fine. Who am I giving the driver of the race to? Hands down, Justin Haley. You would think it's SVG, and I was tempted to, but let me break it down for you. Haley only got 20 minutes on the Chevy Sim on Thursday night before heading out to Chicago. He had to put his own wrap on his own car after getting into the barriers during practice. And on top of all that, he actually ran with SVG for the win at the end and held him off for a little bit there and was sticking with him. Seriously, Haley was hanging out with one of the top road course, street course racers on the planet and holding his own. And on top of that, Justin Haley doesn't have anything set in stone for the 2024 season. He and everybody at Colleague want to re-sign him to be back in the 31, but sponsorship and the contract has not been signed yet. Plus, Haley and his team made the right pit call. Big brain moves from this organization that's the little engine that could in the Cup Series. They don't have the sponsorship. They don't have the big factory backing from Chevy that the Hendrick Motorsports do, and they got it done, and they beat most of the field on Sunday. Kudos to Justin Haley, my driver of the race, hands down for Chicago. Now, a lot of people are talking about Chase Elliott because it's all about the golden boy of NASCAR. On average, this guy is sitting deep in the points thanks to his own stupidity, frankly, because he chose to go snowboarding in the middle of the season. He chose to wreck Denny Hamlin on purpose, and he alone is the reason he missed so many races, and he finds himself in the bad point situation that he's in right now. On average, he's going to have to gain about 7 or 8 points per race from this point forward in order to make the postseason on points alone. But, and this is a big but, he cannot have anyone new win a race this season, any new winners this season, because that will move that cutoff line up, making it significantly harder. Essentially, he's got to run top 5, maybe even top 3 every race from now until Daytona, and get extremely lucky with pit calls, race strats, and put himself in contention to basically finish top 5 every race. Yes, winning you're in will get him in, but with how this team's running, I don't see them winning, honestly. Maybe Atlanta next week might prove an opportunity for Elliott to pull a rabbit out of his ass, but honestly, do not count on that. But I want to hear what you have to say. What did you think about the race in Chicago? Me, overall, honestly, I'm going to give it an 8.5 out of 10. I thoroughly enjoyed this race, and I think it was phenomenal. I hope to see it back next season, and frankly, I hope to see 1 or 2 street races on the NASCAR circuit in the Cup Series moving forward, particularly Vegas, Long Beach, New York, Portland. The opportunities are endless. You can even go international to Mexico City or even Toronto. Where would you like to see NASCAR race on the streets next? Let me know in the comments down below, and while you're there, mash that subscribe button so that you come on back for the next video, and make sure that you log on to AmericanRacingNetwork.com for the latest motorsports news. ARN, the Motorsports Authority. Thank you so much for watching. For Shifting Gears, I'm Alan Bailey. We'll see you at the track.